are going more live events. So you will get a recording of this tonight, and anyone who couldn't be here, you can let them know as well. So let's see here. So before we get started, this webinar is about learning, getting inspired, and feeling empowered over your health. It's for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Emily Penn. I'm certified in functional nutrition, and if you've been with Ripple for a while, so have I. I've been with Ripple since 2017, save for a brief hiatus after I relocated a few years ago and then joined back on remotely. And since 2017, I've worked with patients with a variety of different health concerns, so digestion issues, autoimmunity, inflammation, chronic pain, and mental health challenges like anxiety and depression as well. And for those of you who don't know a little bit about Ripple, we're a multidisciplinary clinic in Washougal. We offer naturopathic medicine, acupuncture, massage, nutrition, mental health counseling, and yoga. And we have regular community classes with Camas Library and on our own. So if you're not already on our newsletter, you can go ahead and put your email in the chat and we will add you so you can stay in the loop on all of our upcoming events. And now, the foundations of healthy eating. So I wanted to start out just by talking about a guiding principle. So before we get into the foundations, the guiding principle, where I'm coming from when it comes to healthy eating. So a lot of mainstream nutrition advice that we get, it tends to be very specific, right? So it's don't eat this, eggs are bad for you, eat paleo, eat vegan, eat keto. And they tend to be isolated recommendations that don't take the individual into account. And some of these recommendations will work for most people. So, for example, eating vegetables is a recommendation that'll work for most people. But nutrition is really highly individual. And so this is the principle that I operate from, and you'll find pretty much anyone else that's trained in functional medicine or integrative medicine is also familiar with this principle, and that's the principle of bioindividuality. And what this means is that our genes, our metabolism, our nutritional needs, our glucose responses to food and other biomarkers vary greatly between individuals, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to nutrition and health. And we all have unique lifestyles, histories, routines, and preferences that even further impact our health. So really any sort of blanket recommendation doesn't take that into account. So this is kind of where I operate from when I approach, nutrition and working with people on making diet changes. Okay, and so now to get into the 3 foundations of healthy eating. So I came up with these foundations because over almost 6 years of working with people on nutrition and on their health, these were the themes that kept coming up, no matter their health goals and no matter what they were trying to work on. These were kind of the 3 things that we always started with. And so those 3 things are balancing blood sugar, fighting inflammation, and nourishing the gut. So foundation number 1. Balanced blood sugar. I think that balanced blood sugar is a foundational piece of health. So I think, if there is one thing, if you do nothing else for your health and you want to just start feeling better, balancing your blood sugar is absolutely the place to start. Imbalanced blood sugar contributes directly to so many health issues like fatigue, energy struggles, sleep issues, mood, anxiety, weight gain, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and conditions like PCOS and many other health concerns too. So it plays a role in a lot of different health conditions, and it can also drive inflammation in the body. So what does balanced blood sugar actually look like? And before we kind of go over these numbers, I just want to make clear that depending on the practitioner that you work with and the lab that you work with, these numbers that you see might be slightly different from person to person. And within functional medicine, there's usually a narrower range on lab tests and numbers because we're looking at the optimal state of health, not just the absence of disease. Usually, on lab results, there's pretty wide margins for where you can fall in. And it's a little bit more narrow coming from the functional medicine perspective. So fasting blood sugar, that's when you wake up in the morning and you fasted overnight. So what is your blood sugar first thing in the morning? Ideally, it's between 75 and 90. Above 99 is considered prediabetes, and then over 126 is cause for concern and could be considered type 2 diabetes. But keep in mind that one high fasting blood sugar reading does not necessarily mean you have diabetes. It's a pattern, right? So that would have to happen multiple times in conjunction with a high A1C, which is the next marker that I'll talk about. So A1C is a really great biomarker because it kind of gives you a snapshot of your blood sugar over the last 3 or so months. So it's more about your overall pattern. So an ideal A1C is between 4.6 and 5.3%. 5.4 to 6% is considered prediabetes, and then above 6% is cause for concern and could indicate diabetes. So usually a type 2 diabetes diagnosis is made when you have an elevated A1C and then multiple elevated fasting blood sugar readings. And what does balanced blood sugar feel like? Because most of us don't check our blood sugar every day or after every meal. So another really good way that you can kind of tap into your blood sugar levels is to just simply tune into how you feel after you eat, right? So imbalanced blood sugar, you might have energy dips. You might get tired about an hour to an hour and a half after a meal. You might have mood swings. You might experience hunger, which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point, and cravings, usually for sugar or carbs. Whereas balanced blood sugar feels like steady energy. You have hunger between meals, but it doesn't feel urgent. You have a steady mood, and you also have fewer cravings for those carbohydrates and sugar. What does balanced blood sugar look like? For all the visual people out there, if you're on Instagram, I would suggest following Glucose Goddess. She is great, and she provides a lot of these visuals, and it really just helps you to understand the impact that blood sugar spikes and then dips can have on your blood sugar. So in this example, we have 2 different types of breakfast, right? We have a bagel with cream cheese and orange juice, which is high carbohydrate, higher sugar breakfast. So you can see we're having that spike up into the red zone, and then we have a dip. And we don't just go back to baseline, we actually fall below baseline. That's a blood sugar dip, and that's when you would experience feelings like kind of an anxious feeling or lightheaded feeling, a little bit shaky, and that hanger that we were talking about. And then below we have an omelet with ham and cheese. So there's virtually no carbohydrates in that. It's mostly comprised of protein and fat. And you can see it doesn't really affect blood sugar at all. In fact, blood sugar stays pretty steady. So if we're looking at a graph of what it looks like, that's what it looks like. So now, how to balance blood sugar. First thing, if I was to make one suggestion to someone about how to start balancing their blood sugar, it would be to reduce and eliminate refined carbohydrates and sugar, since those things tend to have the biggest impact on our blood sugar. So that's, things like conventional bread, cookies, crackers, chips, most of the kind of processed packaged foods that you'll find like in those middle aisles of the grocery store, right? Next thing would be to prioritize protein, healthy fats, and fiber at every meal. So that really looks like, to get more specific, that looks like 20 to 30 grams of protein at a meal, healthy fats like avocado, olive oil, some nuts or seeds, and then fiber from vegetables at every meal. And I think it's especially important to have a breakfast that has all of these elements, because your breakfast, when it comes to your blood sugar, really sets your tone for the day. Because if you're starting out with something sweet, like say you're starting out with pancakes or a muffin or something like that, you're going to have the blood sugar spike and dip. And then you're going to be trying to course correct all day, because when you have that dip, you're going to immediately crave carbs and sugar again. So you're going to kind of be on that little roller coaster. So starting out, feeling really full and energized, it just enables you to make healthier choices throughout the day and feel really good. Another thing you can do is start your meals with salad or low starch vegetable. So what that does is it creates kind of like a fiber matrix in your gut. So it sort of blunts the blood sugar response once the carbohydrates do get into your gut. So this is a good hack for if you're eating out, if you're going out for pizza or pasta or something like that, just starting the meal with a little bit of vegetables beforehand can just reduce your blood sugar response. And if we're eating in the ideal order, it would be vegetables first, followed by your protein, and then eating your carbohydrates last. Of course, there's some meals where this will make sense, but there's some where it won't. So if you're eating tacos, you don't need to, pick apart your tacos and eat them in a certain order. Enjoy your tacos. But when it makes sense, it can be a really useful tool. Another thing that you can do is have a little bit of apple cider vinegar, about a tablespoon, in 8 ounces of water before your meal. And just by drinking that before your meal, that can reduce a glucose spike by up to 33%. So that's pretty significant. And it's just a cool thing to know that is available to you. And the last thing is to move after a meal. So our bodies, when we're using our muscles, they pick up glucose. So that would reduce your blood sugar, the free blood sugar in your blood, right? So this can be as simple as going for a short walk, doing the dishes, dancing a little bit, playing with your dog, doing literally anything that besides just sitting on the couch. And they've done studies on this, and it's something ridiculous, like only a couple minutes. Like you only need to be doing this for like 2 to 5 minutes to see the benefits. But so it's very little and it has a big payoff. So these are all things that you can do. You don't have to do everything at every meal, but they're tools that are available to you to use, and find the ones that work for you. And then here's some other factors that impact blood sugar as well. So sleep is a big one. Just one night where we're not getting enough sleep or not getting good quality sleep can impact our blood sugar the next day. So you'll probably notice if you don't get a good night of sleep, a lot of us are hungrier the next day. And that could be due to, our blood sugar imbalances. Stress is another thing that impacts our blood sugar. So as you can see on the chart over here, a stressful meeting will actually give us a little blood sugar spike followed by a big dip, whereas a non-stressful meeting, our blood sugar stays stable. And this has to do with our stress response. So when our cortisol is activated, this leads to a cascade of a bunch of hormonal events in our body, including our body releasing sugar into our blood. And the purpose of this, it's a survival mechanism. It's so that if we had to fight or flee, our body has the resources to do that. Today, a lot of the stress that we experience doesn't actually require us to run or fight anybody, but our body still doesn't know the difference, right? So we'll still have that physiological reaction. And then, of course, exercise. The more you incorporate exercise, the more insulin sensitive you'll be. So any sort of movement that you're able to do is wonderful. Building muscle is great too, since muscle tends to suck up a lot of the glucose and can make us more insulin sensitive. So now how to personalize it, right? Because we're going back to our principle of bioindividuality. When it comes to blood sugar, people actually have different blood sugar responses to different foods. So you've probably heard of, the GI, the glycemic index of foods. And that can guide us to a certain point, but it's ultimately going to come down to what foods work best for you. So, for example, oats might give me a huge blood sugar spike and I won't feel very good after eating them, but some people really do well with oats. So we're not going to all have the same responses to the same foods. So find the foods that make you feel your best. So how do you do this? Just pay attention to how you feel after meals. If you're feeling tired, hangry, anxious about an hour to an hour and a half after eating, think back to what you ate at your last meal. And maybe that wasn't the most blood sugar friendly meal for you. And keeping a food journal can really help you to identify patterns as you kind of look back and see like, oh, I felt tired after, these 5 meals. What was the common component in all of these meals? And that can kind of guide you as well. But honestly, tuning into your body can just give you a lot of information about your blood sugar status and how you feel. All right, foundation number 2, fighting inflammation. So inflammation is at the root of almost every chronic disease and health ailment. We know this now. We know it's involved in mental health disorders as well. So the thing is, we do need inflammation to heal our injuries and to help fight off illness. You can think about it when you get a cut and the tissue around the cut gets hot and red and swollen. That's inflammation in action. So that's inflammation that we can see. But too much, too often, this is when inflammation can cause issues. And a lot of times we can't see, the way we can see inflammation working on a cut is cool because we know it has a purpose, right? It's harder to see the inflammation that's happening on the inside. But a lot of us have it, right? So these are some signs of chronic inflammation. These are things that your body will start doing to tell you, hey, I'm, maybe a little bit inflamed. Joint and muscle pain, autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, sleep issues, mental health issues, gut issues, weight gain or weight loss, frequent infections, and then skin issues like redness, eczema, and hives. How to keep inflammation in check. When it comes to food, the best thing you can do is consume foods high in antioxidants on a regular basis. So all these foods that are considered anti-inflammatory. And I've listed some of the highest levels here. Dark leafy greens, berries, wild-caught salmon, sardines, and mackerel. And this is because that type of fish, these more fatty fish, are high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory fats. So those are really great for us. And these are some of the most bioavailable sources of omega-3s. Olive oil, herbs and spices, so things like ginger, turmeric, garlic, and cayenne. Dark chocolate, with the main anti-inflammatory component being the cacao. So like a darker chocolate with less sugar would be ideal. And green tea. And then these are some foods to avoid that can contribute to inflammation. So again, we see the refined carbohydrates and processed foods on there. Second is vegetable oils. So this fried foods are typically fried in vegetable oils, and they go by many different names. Canola oil, sunflower, safflower, soybean, corn. And there's some debate around vegetable oils. Like some people will say vegetable oils are absolutely the worst thing in the world. And some people say, oh, they're really not that bad. The thing about vegetable oils is they tend to be high in omega-6 fatty acids. So we need both omega-6s and omega-3s, but we need them in a certain ratio. And now, because these vegetable oils are added to so many of our foods, like once you start looking out for vegetable oils, you'll be shocked to see where they show up, even in, organic foods and healthy foods. So it's really just in a lot of our food supply. So our ratio is out of balance. And when we have too much of the omega-6, that's when inflammation can kind of start, when we don't have enough of those omega-3s to balance it out. So that's something to just be aware of. Added sugars, alcohol, and then any personal food sensitivities that you might have. So when we have a personal food sensitivity and we're repeatedly eating that food, we're just driving inflammation. So these are some of the most common food sensitivities that we see now that could be contributing to your inflammation: gluten, dairy, soy, grains, eggs, and nuts. So again, this isn't going to be necessarily a sensitivity for everybody, but this is just a list of some of the more common ones that we tend to see. And then other factors contributing to inflammation. I bet this list looks familiar: stress, lack of sleep, and lack of movement. So really getting enough sleep, stress management, and then also incorporating exercise and movement into your life are going to be key for helping modulate inflammation. And so now to personalize it. So find ways to regularly incorporate anti-inflammatory foods in ways that you like and can sustain. And this is kind of the key with any healthy habit, is do you like it and can you sustain it, right? So if there's, let's say you absolutely hate turmeric and you don't want to eat it, there's no way that you're going to be able to incorporate that on a daily basis and actually be able to sustain it, right? So okay, you don't have to do that. We can look at other foods and how can you incorporate those and sustain that habit. So a recommendation that I make to a lot of my clients is have a curry weekly. So as part of a meal prep, make a big batch of curry because it incorporates the turmeric and the ginger, those really anti-inflammatory spices. It's got protein, it's got healthy fats, and it's got fiber from vegetables. And then you can, I often eat it just kind of like as a soup, but you could also serve it over some rice or another grain. So that's just an easy way to incorporate anti-inflammatory foods. And if you don't like curry, then that recommendation isn't for you. And we would figure out something else that's anti-inflammatory that we can incorporate, right? And then identify personal food sensitivities through an elimination diet. You can also get a food sensitivity test, and that can be useful as well. But elimination diets are also, those tend to be the gold standard of food sensitivities, right? And so a common one is the Whole30, which most of us think of as a diet, but actually at its heart, it's an elimination diet. And then that can really inform you. If you're doing it right and you're paying attention, that can really inform what foods work well for you and what foods maybe don't work so well for you. Foundation number 3, nourish the gut. Okay, so what's the gut have to do with your health? As we're finding out, pretty much everything. So it modulates inflammation. It plays a role in weight management. It even produces neurotransmitters. So there's a lot of synthesis of different chemicals in our gut. So it contributes to our mental health. It also contributes to our food digestion and nutrient absorption. So you can be eating the healthiest diet in the world, but if your gut is out of whack and it's not able to actually break down your food and absorb the nutrients in your food, it doesn't really matter what you're eating, right? Because your body can't break it down and use it. Our immune system, there's a lot of immune system that lies in our gut. And then the gut is also a key player in the development of autoimmunity, which is becoming more and more common. We're seeing more and more autoimmunity pop up. And the reason for that, or the kind of mechanism behind it, is leaky gut. So if you haven't heard of leaky gut before, what that means, we have a thin layer of cells on our, that's the lining of our gut, right? And they are these cells that are sitting closely together, and they will selectively open and let certain things through that need to pass through from the gut into our bodies, right? So this might be certain nutrients and things like that. With leaky gut, the cells kind of lose this discernment, and things that shouldn't pass through our gut lining start passing through our gut lining. So those could be proteins and other parts of our food and things like that. And those, since those things aren't supposed to be in our bloodstream, they send off the alarms to our body. And this is when kind of that autoimmune, the body attacking itself can start, because that's, signal like, hey, that's not supposed to be here. We should probably get that out of here. And so it's also known as intestinal permeability. All right, so things to remove or reduce for your gut health. Again, refined carbs and processed foods. So if you take nothing else away from tonight, know that if you take out refined carbs and processed foods from your diet, you're going to be doing a lot for your health. Alcohol tends to be really irritating to the gut as well. So if you're dealing with some gut symptoms and you're regularly drinking, that might be something to look at. Artificial sweeteners. So a lot of us will think like, oh, I'm not going to have the sugary Coke. I'll go for the Diet Coke. But they've now shown that a lot of these artificial sweeteners can actually disrupt our gut microbiome. And when it's disrupted, that means we have less of the good bacteria, more of the bad bacteria. And so it can throw off our whole gut microbiome. So artificial sweeteners, I would recommend reducing or eliminating. Excess sugar. And this is because there's pathogenic bacteria and there's certain types of bacteria in our gut, which, by the way, we have good guys in our bad guys in our guts at all times. So it's not unusual to have low levels of pathogenic bacteria in our gut. They only become pathogenic or a problem when they're out of proportion, right? So it's all kind of a delicate balance. But some of the of the things that you'll find in our gut, like Candida, for example. If you've heard of Candida, that's a yeast overgrowth in our gut, and the Candida bugs feed on sugar, and a lot of other pathogenic bacteria feed on sugar as well. So if we're eating too much sugar, that can contribute to some gut issues. Your personal food sensitivities, which we touched on. Anytime you're consuming something that you're sensitive to repeatedly, that's basically activating an inflammatory response, and that can irritate the lining of the gut and contribute to leaky gut and things like that. And then just an interesting thing that I wanted to note on gluten when it comes to leaky gut. So there was a study done. There were 3 groups of people, okay, people who had celiac disease, which is basically having an allergy to gluten, right? They have a serious response to gluten. People who have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity, so they don't have celiac disease, but they have a noted sensitivity to gluten. And then the third group who has no known sensitivity to gluten. So these 3 groups of people, they gave them all gluten and noted what happened. And what they found was that in each group, regardless of whether they were sensitive, not sensitive, or had celiac disease, eating the gluten induced intestinal permeability in everybody. I think there's some limitations still to this study, right? Like, we don't know the state of their gut in general, because someone who's resilient might not have that problem. We don't know what kind of gluten or what kind of quality it was that they were being given. So there's some limitations there, but I always just think that study is so interesting to keep in mind as we kind of look at like all the possible things that could be contributing to the state of our gut. So, and gluten is a whole other topic. We could do a whole other presentation on that, because there's a lot of facets about gluten that are really interesting, and why it seems like more and more people are intolerant to it. Okay, so things to incorporate to support your gut health. Number one thing is a wide variety of plant foods. So the good bacteria in our guts feed on different kinds of fiber. So they really enjoy when we have a wide variety. And this is one of I think the most important recommendations for health, honestly, is variety in our diet, because we used to eat, the numbers are staggering. I forget exactly what they are, but it's like we used to eat hundreds of different species and types of food. And now we eat like the same 5 vegetables every week. So our variety, and, part of that is like just what's available in the grocery store, and we don't grow our own food, and we're just not familiar because we're not out hunting and gathering like we were before. So one of the least sexy recommendations when it comes to nutrition, but honestly, super important. And a way you can do that is, very simple. Just every week when you're at the grocery store, buy 1 or 2 vegetables or fruits that you don't normally eat and incorporate it into your week. Probiotic foods that have the good bacteria, like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, kombucha, things like that. And then there's other gut supportive foods. Bone broth, turmeric, and ginger are all great for gut health. And then other factors that impact our gut health, again, sleep, stress, and exercise, top 3 there, but also environmental toxins. So these are chemicals that are found in personal care products, house products, just our general environment now, that can impact the composition of our microbiome. And then certain medications as well. So over-the-counter painkillers like ibuprofen can actually irritate our gut lining and quote unquote poke holes in the gut, kind of causing that leaky gut even after just 1 dose, which is crazy. And people just don't know that. So if that's something that you rely on or take on all the time and you're having gut symptoms, that might be something to look at. And then also long-term use of PPIs or acid reflux medications as well can, over long-term, alter the gut flora and stomach acid production and things like that. And now to personalize it. So find ways to regularly incorporate these gut supportive foods in ways that you like and can sustain. So if you hate sauerkraut, don't eat sauerkraut. We'll look at other ways that you can get probiotics into your diet. And then identify your personal food sensitivities through an elimination diet, which I touched on before. And then the last thing is identify and treat any gut infections that you might have. And these, if you have been experiencing gut symptoms and you've been cutting out foods and you've been doing all the things to heal your gut and you're not really seeing the progress that you're wanting to make, or if you're finding yourself, intolerant of even more foods than when you started, that could indicate an underlying gut infection. So in that case, I recommend working with a naturopathic doctor to get you the appropriate testing and then identify and treat any gut infections that you might have. Okay, so that was a lot. But those are the 3 foundations of healthy eating. And now I would like to offer you a different way to view food. So as you're kind of integrating these foundations and figuring out how they apply to you and how you can actually apply them to your own life and your own habits, this shift in mindset for me was probably one of the most transformative things when it came to food, when I started viewing food differently. So this is how I started changing the way that I looked at the food I was eating. Okay, so many of us were conditioned to view food strictly through caloric density, right? We thought if it's low calorie, it's healthy. If you don't have this mentality, I applaud you, honestly, because I think any of us that lived through the 90s will kind of know that, where they took the fat out of everything, 100-calorie packs, lean cuisines. Basically, we were just trying to subsist on as few calories as possible. The lower the calories, the healthier it is, right? So the switch that helped me a lot was, instead of looking at food through the lens of calories, I started viewing food through nutrient density instead. So that was asking myself the question, will this food provide me the nutrients I need to feel good and to thrive? Right? So a little bit more into that. Is the food providing me with micronutrients? Am I getting these trace minerals, even more than just the macro parts of it? Because we also tend to focus on macros, right? Like there's the whole, if it fits your macros thing, and we're not really paying attention to the micronutrients. And that's what's showing up in plant foods, in animal foods, basically in the things that are not refined processed foods. And so another thing, when you're checking labels on foods, I don't even look at nutrition labels. I do not look at those numbers because they're really sort of, most of the time, meaningless to me. Instead, I check the ingredient list because you want to see what the food that you're eating is made of. So oftentimes the more ingredients a product has, or if you're running into lots of ingredients that you can't identify and you're not quite sure what it is, it's less likely that it's going to contain things that you need for optimal health. So checking the ingredients. And then another question that I ask myself too is, what can I add to this meal or snack to increase its nutrient density? Could I throw in a handful of greens? Could I sprinkle some pumpkin seeds on top of this salad? And that would give me some zinc and a little bit of, extra protein. So just looking for ways that you can really, up the nutrient density of your meal. And this has helped me a lot. And it takes that shift away from, if you're someone who does tend to focus on like the calories or the numbers, it shifts you away from that and looking more at what a meal or a food can offer you in terms of actual nutrition. And then the last thing that I want to touch on tonight is emotional nourishment and our relationship with food, because I think these are 2 things that are really important, that are overlooked in a lot of nutrition advice, or a lot of, for lack of a better word, diet programs, because a lot of times we don't acknowledge these things when it comes to food, but it's important that we do. So your mental state around food is just as important as the food that you're eating. So I think cultivating a healthy relationship with food is one of the best investments that we can make in our health, because food is an inevitable part of our life. It's a part of our daily life. Usually multiple times a day, we're going to have to be eating and faced with food. And if we're experiencing shame or guilt, or, it's just taking up a lot of our bandwidth and energy, that's not going to be great for us, right? That stress around the food is arguably worse than any food we could be eating. So cultivating a healthy relationship with food is really important. And then I also think it's important to acknowledge our emotional needs around food. So we all have comfort foods that we turn to. Some of us are stress eaters. Some of us have nostalgic foods that we like to enjoy. So it's important to, acknowledge food in this way too. Food tends to be very emotional for people. It's tied to our nourishment and childhood and all sorts of formative experiences, right? So we can't really look at changing what we eat and how we eat without addressing these aspects of food as well. So what I wanted to say is it's okay to eat something for the emotional nourishment it provides, right? So I just got done telling you about, switching food to look at nutrient density. And yes, that's important, but not every meal you eat has to be, the pinnacle of health and nutrient density too, right? There are some foods or meals that we will enjoy simply for the emotional nourishment it provides. So when you do that, don't dwell on feelings like shame or guilt. Enjoy whatever you're eating thoroughly, and then move on and continue with your nutrient-dense diet. So health is a pattern, right? It's not made or broken in one meal. So it's what you do 80 to 90% of the time, and the things you do occasionally are really not going to ultimately impact the outcome of your health, right? So an example for me, there's a strata that my family makes every Christmas for Christmas Day, and it is, it's loaded, it's brioche bread and a couple different kinds of really rich cheese, tons of eggs, tons of heavy cream, some bacon in there. And it's not really nutrient dense necessarily. Like there's not a lot of vegetables in there, but the emotional nourishment and satisfaction that I get eating that every year with my family is immense and could not be beat by any other food that I would choose to eat. So there's things like that, I fully acknowledge. We all have things like that and we should be able to enjoy them. And then the other thing is find healthier versions of the things that you love. So I'm a big fan of eating what you want, but just using better ingredients and approaching it better. So a lot of times, sometimes like you just need a cinnamon roll. That's just a good old fashioned cinnamon roll. Like you need the real thing sometimes, right? We can't like smart our bodies completely, but a lot of times there are healthier versions of things that we like that are just made with more nutrient dense ingredients that are just as enjoyable that we can have every once in a while. So there's that option as well. So thank you for listening to all of that. And if that was interesting to you and you are interested in, diving a little bit deeper into your own personal health and nutrition and what that looks like for you, you can schedule with me. I do free 15-minute consultations too, if you want to run some health concerns or goals by me and chat a little bit more and see if we're a good fit. So you can visit the Ripple Wellness website and browse my offerings. You can email us or you can give us a call and we can set something up. And I've got 2 packages to support you. So they both include our 90-minute initial consult where I'm really getting to know you and you as a bio individual. And then the larger package offers 3 follow-up consultations. So that's really great for anyone looking for ongoing support and accountability. And then I have a smaller package where we just have 1 follow-up consultation to check in. So depending on you, either one of those could work. And then upcoming classes and events with Ripple. So we have a breathwork circle this weekend with Emily Olson at Live Well. You can register through Ripple. We have a foam rolling workshop with Tara at Forest Moon Yoga. And I think there's actually a wait list for this now. It might be full, but if you wanted to get on the wait list, you can go ahead and register. And then we have a few more upcoming talks with Camas Library this spring. Some of the topics include facial gua sha, menopause, and fertility. So keep an eye out for dates and times on those. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're not already on our email list, you can drop your email in the chat to be added to our newsletter. And then you can also check the event calendar on our website. You can check the Camas Library event calendar, and you can also follow us on Instagram at Ripple Wellness. And I would like to thank everybody for coming this evening. I've had a really great time sharing my foundations for healthy eating, and I am going to open it up for questions. So if you have a question, you can take yourself off mute and ask, or if you prefer to type in the chat, you can do in the chat. And I'm going to see if there's some questions here to kick us off. But here we go. Let me stop sharing. Okay. There we go. So if anyone has a question, feel free to take yourself off mute or raise your hand. Let's see some questions I see in the chat. So the amount of apple cider vinegar to add to the 8 ounces of water is 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. Let's see, somebody asked if I have a brand or template of a food journal that I recommend. I do not. I recommend whatever works best for you. So some people like handwriting it in a journal. Some people just like putting it in notes on their phone. So it's really going to be whatever works for you. At this time, I don't really have a template that I love and recommend. Okay, and then somebody also asked the brand of apple cider vinegar I recommend, and then mentioned that Bragg's, which is a very common brand, changed ownership and they noticed it looked different. So I actually did not know that Bragg's changed ownership. When it comes to apple cider vinegar, look for raw with the mother. That indicates it still has, some of the good probiotics in there, and then organic if possible as well. And I'll take this question about bone broth as well. So somebody asked about bone broth. What does that exactly mean? And does this include homemade broth made with leftover bones? Great question. So the difference between bone broth and just a regular chicken broth or something like that is the amount of time that it simmers. So a bone broth is usually left to simmer for anywhere up to 24 hours. And because it's simmered for longer, it draws more nutrients out of the bones and collagen and gelatin and all those things that are really great for our gut. So it really has to do with the timing. If you're shopping for bone broth, the biggest thing that you can notice, and this is a great example of a time I would look at the nutrition facts on a food, bone broth will have more protein than just a regular broth. So that's a really good way to tell if a bone broth will have anywhere from like 9 to 11 grams of protein per cup, whereas a regular broth will not have any protein in it. Can I use apple cider vinegar pills? If so, how many? I think you can use the pills. I don't know that it'll have, apple cider vinegar has lots of health benefits. And so I believe that they can provide you some of the health benefits, but I don't know about apple cider vinegar pills before meals if it has the same impact on blood sugar. So that would be a really interesting thing to look into. If the apple cider vinegar pills have the same effect on blood sugar before meals as apple cider vinegar, the liquid form in water. Someday, maybe I will share the recipe for the family strata. It is very good. Collagen supplements. Collagen supplements can be helpful for gut support as well. Collagen is our most abundant protein in the body. It supports our hair, skin, nails, gut, things like that. So if you like the collagen supplement, you can definitely incorporate that. Which type of collagen do I recommend? So in terms of brands, I like the Great Lakes collagen, which you can order online. It's also available at Trader Joe's. But generally, when you're looking, if you get the collagen from grass-fed cows, from a company that uses grass-fed cows, that would be ideal. Oh, type 1, 2, or 3. So they have different functions and different animal So okay, so for people who don't know what we're talking about, there's different types of collagen, types 1, 2, or 3. And I think it's depending on the animal, they'll have different types of collagen. Most collagen supplements out there are made from beef bones. So I think there's different benefits to all 3. So if you can find a way to incorporate all 3 in your diet through supplements or through different broths, like if you, for example, if you buy bone broth or you make bone broth at home, if you rotate between like a chicken bone broth and a beef bone broth and maybe a turkey bone broth or something like that, that would be best to get a variety for optimal health benefits. Good question. Do you recommend a probiotic supplement? So generally speaking, for health maintenance, for someone who's not, dealing with severe gut issues, I would recommend eating fermented foods on a daily basis. And the thing with probiotic supplements, there's a lot of things to consider. There is the fact that we don't know how they're manufactured, how long they're sitting on a shelf. Were they sitting in a hot delivery truck one summer day, like waiting to be loaded into the grocery store that damaged a bunch of the bacteria? We don't know these things, right? So there's a lot that happens between the production of the supplement and then where, by the time it actually gets to us, there's a lot of things that can happen, right? And then there is, does the bacteria survive through our stomach acid and get all the way to our gut? Where does it need to be? There's better probiotic supplements available now that kind of ensure that delivery to the right part of our gut and everything like that. So, long story short, if you're looking at probiotics more for gut maintenance, I would say your money is better spent on a variety of fermented foods at the grocery store. That being said, there's also people that are working on, eradicating specific infections or who may need extra gut support, who need that higher dose that you would find in probiotic pills. And so that's when a probiotic supplement might be appropriate. Okay, so someone asked in the chat, how do you approach older folk who are pretty much clueless about gut health and live on refined foods, high salt processed food, and are unaware of probiotics and or won't take supplements regularly? So you have to meet people where they're at with nutrition and health in general, right? So I would say any sort of small changes that you can introduce that they actually enjoy doing, like maybe they mostly live on refined foods, but they really like soup. And so, if you can't get them to make a soup, buying higher quality soups and making sure that their fridge is stocked with these higher quality soups, and maybe they'll default to that more. So it's really about the small changes where you can meet them where they're at, because you're right, it's going to be pretty hard to overhaul, but introducing some fresher foods, some good quality animal proteins, things like that would be really beneficial. Great question. How much protein should we have every day? So the general guide, there's kind of a range. The general guideline is about half of your body weight in grams. So if you're 150 pounds, about 75 grams of protein per day. If you're active or you're working on, putting on muscle, building muscle, you might need even more than that. Bodybuilders will do like gram for gram. So a 150-pound bodybuilder would be trying to get 150 grams of protein a day. Most of us don't need quite that much. So I would say at least half of your weight in grams, and maybe a little bit higher if you're active. This person says they're currently vegetarian and their health coach regularly tells me I don't get enough. It's actually surprising because we were kind of told like, oh, Americans eat way too much protein. But then a lot of us actually aren't getting enough for a variety of reasons. And there's certain, getting older, we need more protein. If we've got, certain health conditions or infections that we're fighting off, we might need increased protein too. So what I tell people generally when it comes to meals is aim for about 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal. And that's also very satiating, right? And 20 grams, if we're talking, animal protein, 20 grams is about 4 ounces of meat. So it's not a ton of meat either that you have to be eating necessarily. And if you feel like you need a little bit of extra protein, that's when protein powders might come in handy, some high protein snacks, things like that throughout the day as well. But I would say, a big hint for your protein needs too is like, if you're feeling pretty tired, that's a good indication that you might need more protein. And that's a very general statement. And there's a lot of different reasons we could feel tired. But if you feel like you're doing a lot of good things and maybe you're still feeling tired, that would be one place to look at your protein intake too. Ooh, bringing in the hot questions. Okay. I've always heard that a good rule of thumb for healthy eating is to eat as vegan/plant-based as possible. Is there any truth to this, or is there a better rule of thumb? Really good question. There's definitely been a vegan, plant-based kind of push in the last few years. And, it's for health reasons, environmental reasons. There's a lot of different reasons. I have been both vegan and vegetarian in my life. Currently, I would consider myself an omnivore. I kind of eat everything. And the thing that I don't necessarily like about that agenda being pushed is for animal foods, there's a lot of bioavailable nutrients. I think we are kind of told that animal foods were like basically just good for protein. But the more that I've learned about nutrition, the more that I've seen that there are a lot of valuable bioavailable nutrients in animal foods too. So I think it's about a balance, because I do think that we need plenty of vegetables, plenty of plants. And again, it's going to come down to personal preference too, because for a while when I was vegan, I was really, really thriving living that way. And a lot of people do really thrive for a long time. But then at a certain point, and you kind of see this, particularly with women and hormonal balance and things like that, you might be thriving for a really, really long time. And if you're not like supplementing appropriately and being kind of careful and making sure that you're getting everything that you really need, you might kind of hit a plateau where suddenly you're not feeling so good. And then people who decide to incorporate even small amounts of animal foods back into their diet will see themselves feeling better. So a little bit of truth on that. I don't think that vegan plant-based is the only way to, basically there's no one right diet for health. It's going to ultimately come down to your bio-individuality. And there's different cultures all over the world that have all different patterns of eating, and they all have great health outcomes, right? So if you look at like the blue zones and things like that, there's Mediterranean diets, there's people more in Japan who eat very high carbohydrate diets. And we tend to think of high carb diets as bad, but it's like the bulk of their calories are coming from sweet potatoes and rice and things like that, but they still don't have kind of the health outcomes that we're seeing in the US. So that's a really good question. It's a big question. Ultimately comes down to bio-individuality and what works best for you, but there's value in all sorts of different foods. And if we're looking at it from a lens of nutrient density, animal foods do have nutrients that our bodies need. So do plants. Okay. Another question. Oh, is there value to MCT oil and how to incorporate it in the diet? So for those who don't know, MCT oil, it stands for medium chain triglycerides, and it is it's extracted from typically coconut oil, and it's a type of fat that your body picks up and uses immediately for energy. So it's not stored in the body as fat. It tends to have a thermic effect. So increases metabolism. It's great for your brain health. There's definitely value to it. I would consider that a healthy fat. It's been studied for its properties in weight loss, because if we have it it's satiating, right? It's a healthy fat, it's very satiating. So people who have MCT oil in the morning will eat fewer calories throughout the day. So if weight loss is one of your goals, I think it's a valuable tool. How to incorporate it. It sort of got introduced to us through bulletproof coffee. So if you've heard of that, that's coffee that's blended with butter and MCT oil. And it's this very energizing coffee that people use. Collagen is a great way to do it. That's what I do actually, is I put MCT oil in my coffee in the morning. Just make sure you emulsify it. Otherwise there's oil sitting on top and that's really gross. You could also add it to smoothies. It's flavorless and odorless. So you could even, use it as like a salad dressing or just drizzle it on your food. So hopefully I got some of those questions. Okay, what should you do if you have to take antibiotics? Great question. I would recommend loading up on fermented foods and potentially using a probiotic during this time. Just make sure that you take it away from your antibiotics. So if you have to take your antibiotics in the morning, have your probiotic foods at night, and then also eat plenty of plant foods to help feed the good bacteria in your gut. Okay, next question. Any preferences on brands, types of yogurt? Great question. Yeah, because a lot of yogurts have added sugar. Okay, so when it comes to dairy products, I recommend full fat and grass-fed if you can find it for pretty much anything. Grass-fed dairy products tend to just have a healthier nutrition profile for people. And then full fat, because that's kind of how, that's not kind of, that's how it's made is it in its naturally occurring state. Dairy has the full fat, and it was kind of the whole low fat movement where we replace it with sugar. And you're also going to find that it's more satiating that way. So when it comes to dairy products, full fat, grass fed, if you can get it. And if you can't find full fat, sometimes it's hard to find like full fat Greek yogurt, just get a higher percentage. Let's see, Greek yogurt's great in terms of protein too. If you're looking to up your protein in your diet, go for Greek protein. Would cow's milk yogurt be problematic for young people who are dairy intolerant? So yes, if people have an intolerance to cow's milk, I wouldn't give it to them probably. But they also, if they're not sensitive to sheep's milk, that's another option as well. All right, and we are getting close to the end, so I'll just answer these last two questions in the chat. Any favorite books on this topic? So it's hard because everybody's got their own little like thing, right? And I've pulled from so many different places, but as far as resources, I would say Dr. Mark Hyman, who's a functional doctor, has written lots and lots of books on the topic of health. So I would look into Dr. Mark Hyman's work. I'll put his name in the chat. And then also Max Lugavere is a health and science journalist, and he looks mostly into brain health. That's kind of his focus, but he has a book called Genius Foods. And now we know that really our metabolic health and our brain health are very linked and very connected. So the things that we do that help our brain will help our metabolism and vice versa. The physical and mental health connection. So I would say those are two really great sources for just kind of like general health information. And I think they touch on a lot of the things I talked about tonight. So for further reading, I would check them out. And then last thing, brand recommendation for MCT oil, bulletproof, or I just go for an organic one. Honestly, there's one that I get at Costco that's organic, and I believe it's Sports Research, but bulletproof or Sports Research, I would recommend. And we are officially at our time. So thank you everyone for joining me this evening. I hope that you learned something or took something away from it. And again, if you would like to further discuss with me, we can do a free 15-minute consultation, or if you want to book an appointment with me, you know where to find me. So thank you so much to Camas Library for having me this evening.
And thank you for doing the session tonight, Emily.
Yes, of course. All right. Take care, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.